Warm, bright, soft, dark. These are some terms that drummers, percussionists, and people in sound design, in the film world, anything related to music often use. If you've ever wondered what those terms mean or what musicians mean when they use these terms, I'm going to give you my definition. I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation of them. Let's start with bright. Often when musicians use the term bright, they mean something that's really high pitched. Sometimes it could be a piece of metal, like chimes that are clinking together. Think that word clink, tink, like a couple spoons together, or a spoon on a porcelain bowl, or a soup bowl. Clink, 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 clink. Think chimes, like as I mentioned. I have some keys here that are actually chimes, made to be chimes, and they have a very bright, high pitch. Sparkles is a good word in the English language, in the English lexicon. Very sparkly. It's like tick, 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 tick. It sounds like it happens and then it decays rather fast. It's resonant, very high pitch resonant, and then goes away, right? So that's an example of a very bright sounding instrument versus this conga drum, which is tuned lower. It's a large drum, and it has a darker tone, a warmer sound, a lower pitch. If we were thinking on the frequency range, like highs, mids, lows, or trebles, mids, and basses, then this would be more in the treble range. This would be in that higher pitch range. Think s, t, t. Think those sounds. Think ringing. Hopefully there's no ringing in your ears, but if there were, think that type of thing. Think of a doorbell. Think these keys. Think of a triangle. Think of those are the right side of the piano versus the left side of the piano, right? So those are the higher, brighter sounds. And we use these terms bright instead of something like, oh, it's louder, or oh, it's really high pitch. We might use that term high pitch, but bright is a good way of relating to other musicians. So the converse is dark. Again, we have this drum right here, but also we could say, let's change what I'm hitting it with. I have this felt, it's nice and soft. It's another term we use often for sounds. I bring the overall dynamic, how loud it is, down, but it changes the sound to what I like to think of, and everyone's different. This is a subjective thing. It brings it to a warmer sound. It's already a warm sound, but now I'm describing it based on related to itself as a drum. And that's because of the actual material and the density of the actual thing that's hitting that instrument. If it's more or less dense, if it's softer, that's going to change the instrument. If it causes it to be muffled or muted and not go through as the higher pitches to come through as much, sometimes we refer to that result as warmer or darker in tone. And warmth and darkness are sometimes and often actually used synonymously. They're used likewise in exchange for one another. So if it's a drum that has a darker tone or a cymbal that has a darker tone, we usually mean it's on the lower frequency range as opposed to the higher frequency range. Now, we can get deeper into this. I'm being very general, very basic, and we'll explain a little bit more as we move on. So we got dark, bright, and you have warmth, and then you have this thing of dry and wet. And usually what we mean by a dry or wet sound is its resonance, how long it carries off. Now, I have these drums. This is something that we use in production terms when we're using sound engineering or mixing or whatnot. We might say it's drier or wet, meaning there's less or more effects, less or more reverb and analog. Right now, I just have this mic with my voice, and so the drums are just playing. They're very dry. There's no effects or anything on it like that. But if I add a little bit of reverb to them, Now it becomes very wet because I added quite a bit of reverb so that you can hear that exaggeration, that difference of sound. Now it's more of a wet sound. It's carrying farther. And we're just borrowing these terms from other places in life and applying it to what we hear orally. So we have bright, warm, dark, we have dry, and we have wet. Another term that we use, and lastly, is texture. I mentioned density, but texture we sometimes use for, that's what it's a very tactile word, how it actually feels, whether it's rough or soft, but we use these terms to relate to what we're hearing, to describe them, right? So texture, if I hear something and it's very staccato and it sounds like gravelly, it sounds like, you know, a hard surface scraping across another hard surface, perhaps maybe it's my, you know, my fingers going across this drum here, that I might use texture to describe the way it sounds, the texture of that sound. It has a scratchy texture, and I'm using that to describe the way my hands are moving across the drum. We use these terms because sometimes we're in the studio and creating something and we're trying to relate to the artist. We're trying to relate to the other musicians. We're trying to relate to someone in the creation and the community of the music, the art and the music. So we can get more into it, but that's a very basic definition. Texture meaning how it feels, but now I'm taking a tactile feel, a very visceral thing, and I'm transcribing or translating and relating it to what my ears hear. I know what rough feels like, dry skin versus skin that is softer and more moisturized, right? So I can do that since I understand how that feels, then I might relate to that orally and saying, well, it's a very dry sound, it's a very rough sound. That's meaning I'm using more staccato as opposed to that's smoother, right? It's a rougher sound as opposed to smoother. Smoother might mean, like, if you think about a smooth rock that's been smoothened by a river and water, there's no cracks and dents in it, and my hand just glides across it. Well, in music, we can think of sounds that are all blended together very well, smooth. And that's all we're trying to do, is relate and communicate these ideas across. So there's a few terms for you. Hopefully this helps you to relate a little bit more to your musician friends, or you as a musician, or perhaps you were just wondering, what do they mean by using all of these terms? Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you. I'll see you soon.